Going to spend quite a bit of time on legislative initially. And then we're going to have our student presentation from Margarita, which we're looking forward to. Public comment at 9:30, that's a hard stop. And then we're going to have some discussion about committee and member updates. And just, Randy, lunch starts at 11. What's our hard stop for? Is it 11:30 or is it 11?
Lunch actually starts at 11, so we want to leave here by 10:30 in order to get down there in time.
We need half an hour?
Well, between parking and getting there.
Right, okay, yeah. All right. So anyway, that's where we are. And then we have, of course, the joint lunch. We're going to talk about legislative kickoff when Orlando has perfect timing. Let him get set. So Jay Lee and Orlando are going to help us to understand the layout of the legislative landscape with some suggestions about particular bills that we may want to discuss this morning so that we have guidance in terms of positions we might take, and as well as the visits that we're going to have this afternoon. The materials are on page 156, and you have additional things. So Jay Lee and Orlando, what's your thing? You should introduce yourselves as well. So.
Okay, hello everyone. I am Jay Lee Schultz, the new Director of Advocacy and Engagement. And over the past couple of days, I've gotten to meet several of you and really excited by the energy and engagement that you all bring, and really look forward to working closely with you.
Great. And I'm Orlando Cano with Orlando Cano Consulting, hired on this session to help out the state board. So thank you.
Okay, so what we're looking to do in the time we have with you is to go over some kind of broad stroke, high level highlights of some of the key themes that we're seeing highlighting from the governor's budget, some of those priorities, and then Orlando's going to give kind of what's the pulse, what are we hearing so far in some of the meetings that we've had up on the Hill, and also kind of what we're seeing in some work sessions. And then we're going to focus in on a few key bills to get some of your input on those, the positions that the board might take. And then I also want to cover just some procedural things about how I'll help serve as your liaison, and looking for your input too on how I can be helpful to you. In your handouts, you'll see this one that's titled Children and Families. This is a couple page highlights from the governor's budget, explaining the investments that the governor's office is proposing for this biennial budget. I want to just set the stage with this, and the visual that you see up on the screen here is showing that over the past 3 biennia, almost 2/3 of new general fund spending went towards K-12, and so that's about $12 billion. So for this supplemental budget, the focus for K-12 is really on covering the ongoing cost to meet the state's obligation to fully fund public education, and then some small additional investments. So what you see in the highlights document is investments in the areas of early learning and child welfare, and a page on workforce. And then for K-12, there are just a couple of items, additional investments being proposed for expanding nursing services, strengthening the statewide network for behavioral health and safety supports, tribal, tribal liaison to facilitate access for career-connected learning, and increasing educational continuity for justice-involved youth through more supports. Another item I want to point out from this is in the area of workforce and career-connected learning. The governor's budget does propose funding to cover 2 additional staff members at the Educational Research and Data Center. And this aligns with a budget request that came from the state board. So we're happy to see that in the governor's budget. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Orlando to give kind of a feel for what the pulse is and what we're hearing so far.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaylee. Good morning, board members. So we've had a number of meetings on the Hill these past couple of days and a few more scheduled for this afternoon. But let me share with you a few themes we're hearing, especially in education, that we're hearing on the Hill. We're finding some support for strengthening the high school and beyond plans. We've heard from some to have the graduation rules be left alone and take hold. This would give us time to do the research on how they're working and what changes or additional pathways are needed, and then flexibility to make adjustments to those rules. We've also heard, let's be mindful of what we're asking schools to do. The more we ask schools to take on certain wraparound services, other local providers may cease to provide those services and thus causing a burden on schools. Some examples cited were year-round childcare efforts, mental health delivery in the schools, and at the same time, interest in schools addressing social emotional health needs. I'd also point out that both chairs in the House and Senate have unveiled some omnibus proposals in early learning. And these are, so far we're looking at the drafts, but they're very much looks aligned with the state board's legislative platform. Hearings we're hearing are going to be scheduled for next Monday and Tuesday, and we'll be monitoring closely how they evolve along the process. We've also heard of interest in mastery-based learning and social emotional learning. And there's also interest in improving funding flexibility for waiver schools. Many in the education field are very appreciative for the recent efforts and funding levels that the legislature has provided, but there's still some that are saying it's still not enough. And I think we could probably all agree, and special education is going to be a focus of the legislature, as well as another priority item of the state board. So those are kind of the top line things that we've been hearing so far in day 3, or day 4, I guess, today. And so, thank you.
Okay, so I would like to now draw your attention to a handout you have that shows all the list of bills on our tracker. This is something that throughout session I will send a weekly update to the board of the updated tracker as bills get added. Currently, this tracker includes the pre-filed bills, the bills that have been added every day, as well as bills from last session that are coming back up now in year 2 here of the biennium. So it's a pretty lengthy tracker already, but we'll continue to add to it and update it. And really, it's looking pretty broadly, so highlighting bills in the K-12 arena. And as we go, I look to refining this and categorizing it and kind of honing in more on the ones that align most directly with the board's strategic plan and legislative platform. So you'll notice columns for priority and position. Those have not been fully updated yet. Got to kind of do some catch-up work to do that, and also need your input to help make some of those decisions. So I'm not going to go through all of this. This is more informational, so you'll get these weekly, and I encourage you to scan through the list. And you'll notice in the email that I sent for week 1, I pulled a few highlights and kind of drawing your attention to a couple key priority bills for the board. And so I intend to continue pointing your attention to certain key items, as well as any developments or changes that we see as those bills move through the process. But also, I would ask you to, on your own, look through that list, and please do reach out to me if there are other issues that you want to bubble up and draw more attention to, or if you have any questions that you want me to explore, or any other support I can provide as we look at the legislation over the session. So for now, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of key bills. I'm going to just give a very brief summary of the bill and what the thinking is around what the board's position might be, but then also looking for your input on that as well. So one bill that I want to mention is in dual credit. This is House Bill 1164 with a companion bill in the Senate 5427. And there was a public hearing on the top, or a work session on the topic of dual credit, or in the House education already this week. And we are I'm not going to go in too much on the bill because we are expecting there to be amendment to it to make it reflect OSPI's report on covering the costs for dual credit. So OSPI was directed last session to do a study and make recommendations on making dual credit cost-free to students, but within existing resources. And so they put out that report. It was due to the legislature in November, so a real quick timeline there. And we're expecting to see an amendment that will make the bill reflect that report. And so the main things that we are expecting to see is that it would make dual credit cost-free for all students and phased in and within existing resources. I haven't seen what that looks like yet. I would defer to Michaela if she wants to share anything else on that.
So if you go back to TVW, you can watch the testimony from Randy. I think you were there. I was watching from afar. But yeah, the bill is, I believe, going to be dropped very shortly and probably will be a committee amendment to the existing bill. As you mentioned, we were directed by the legislature last session to create a work group and look at recommendations of making dual credit cost-free within existing appropriations. So it specifically called that out. It was a very short turnaround since last year was a long session and the report was due by November 1st. So we had a short timeline to do that. The report is on our website, so you can access the final report. Basically, what it does is it's a phase-in of looking at students first as basic education students. So looking at a phase-in of the dual credit programs, and everybody knows there's three kinds of parts to dual credit: AP, IB, exam-based dual credit programs. There are Running Start, of course, which everybody is familiar with, and college and the high school. And those three, if you look at the report, those three are phased in over time with the cost coming out of existing appropriations. So school districts would be on the hook for the college and the high school AP, IB test fees, Cambridge. And then the community colleges would be on the hook for any of the Running Start fees. What we're really talking about are fees that are added to for a student that are in addition. Obviously, this doesn't include tuition, but oftentimes students are charged additional fees. We're not talking about S&A fees here. We're talking about fees that are added on. Particularly, this hits hard around textbooks. So when you are taking a pre-calculus class at a high school, you take the class and you are issued a book and you're good to go. Once you hit a pre-calc class at a community college for Running Start, you then are paying textbook fees. So the phase-in would look at taking out of existing appropriations. And we're not, I mean, Chris, you can go back and look at the testimony. The superintendent testified this on whenever day that was. Tuesday, Wednesday, they're all blurring together. Anyway, Chris testified on this, so you can go back and he really spells out the basic fundamental belief that these students are basic ed students first. Their first priority, of course, is to access high school credit. For dual credit is the first priority, and then the dual credit is that additional incentive for students that are entering any of these programs. This is a conversation that we've had with, particularly with SBCTC over the last several months. We continue to work with them, even though there were phrases like food fight and other things said at the hearing. That's not the approach that we're taking. We're really working with Jan and Carly, who is her deputy, to try to find a place that we can agree on in terms of moving this idea forward. The superintendent is very passionate about this topic. This is one of our highest priorities this session. We think that those students are basic ed students first. They should not be charged additional fees in order to access dual credit. He had a handout, and I can pass it around to the board for the committee that would be very useful. It shows the discrepancy, the opportunity gap between those students that are on free and reduced lunch and those students that are not. It's about a 15% difference between those students that are accessing dual credit from free and reduced lunch versus non-free and reduced lunch students. So there is an opportunity gap. We heard it in many of the members talked about the gaps, seeing those. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to that testimony. But we're engaged in the conversation and want to move it forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Michaela, for providing that overview. So in light of all of that, what we would suggest for the position would be that the board supports the policy of expanding dual credit and keeping the cost off of students and families, but with a concern about the funding. And so wanted to see if any board members wanted to chime in on that briefly. We do have a couple other bills to cover, though. So would you guys like to take input now?
I think it makes sense for each one to then have some brief board discussion. And so we have MJ and anybody else?
I'll just start just a clarifying question. So like college and the high school is one I know that really across the state is very inequitable access. It feels like I know a lot of districts in my region aren't able to offer it, at least, because of the costs. And so are you saying that this bill then would put the cost, so every district would have to offer it cost-free to their students, so therefore the district would be picking up the cost?
That is the plan. Yeah, the districts would pick up the cost of the college and the high school component of it. I will say with college and the high school, there are other pieces that districts, I think, find challenging with college and the high school, and that's identification of faculty because they are dependent on the hiring and it could be down to department by department requirements for that faculty. Often it is a master's degree in the content area. And so we, in the report, if you go back to the report that we published, there are also other considerations or other recommendations. This is our first recommendation on funding, but as you look at the report, there are other recommendations. One of those is to have a conversation and continue the work around how to identify faculty for high schools, because we know that is a barrier. If you don't have a teacher in math that has a master's degree in that content area, oftentimes the community college is like, you don't have someone that can teach college and the high school. So that's another barrier there.
Just to follow up then to that, is that mean, but that is not part of this bill? Is that accurate?
Correct. That is not that particular policy, but part of our bill also includes extending the work group, continuing to work on these other pieces, support, counseling, advising. We know all of those issues come to bear, so that would be part of it. The second part of the bill, if you read it, when you read the amendment, is continuing the work group.
Mary?
Question, Michaela, for the, I'm trying to operationalize this for questions a district might have. If they currently have an AP or IB program and offerings, if this goes into effect, that means that going forward, those programs that they currently have existing, they will now be having to pick up the fees?
Correct. The test fees of that. So, and those would phase in, not the first year would be just a transition year. The following year would be AP, IB, Cambridge exam-based dual credits. The third year out, so we're talking about 2022 at this point, would be, the third phase would be just Running Start fees and college and the high school fees. The final year would be textbooks for Running Start. So this is a phase-in over 4 years. So there's a transition year where there's no change.
Okay.
So the next one is exam-based fees. We have a meeting coming up in addition with the College Board to talk about, is there a way to streamline the process as a state? Other states have done this, where we get a bulk rate for example, for AP courses. The the AP course is $94 per test. Free and reduced lunch students receive a $54 discount on the exam. So we are trying to have discussions with folks at the College Board about, is there a way to do kind of a bulk rate? So not every 295 school districts are trying to do this separately, but rather the state is doing this in a more coordinated and lessening the cost on districts. So we're in the middle of those conversations. But again, phase in over 4 years, different components of this.
Thank you, because that's raising my concern that that is could potentially provide a disincentive for schools to continue offering these courses, and that to me then it absolutely defeats the purpose and starts creating other barriers if they're having to absorb these costs.
Hear him, and then I'll recognize myself.
So before I ask this, full disclosure, my wife is one of the folks that developed one of the college and the high school courses for biology at the UW. So just so you know where I'm coming from on this. You use the term fee because college and the high school, there's two parts to that. There's the tuition cost, and then there's the cost of any additional materials. And in the case of the biology, it's a textbook that's different from the textbook that's used currently in biology. So will this cover the tuition part?
It would cover both. We would expect that both parts are covered.
Okay.
Now, traditionally, if that student is sitting in a, and I don't know this particular case, and it could be different from district to district, if they're sitting generally, if they're sitting in a K-12 classroom, they're not going to be charged for an extra fee for a textbook.
Right.
They're going, the district is going to pick that up.
Some districts cover the whole thing right now. Others, they'll cover the textbook, but not the tuition.
Yep.
Some cover the tuition and the textbook. So it's all over the map
And
right now.
you hit on it right there. That has been the problem with even developing this report, is it is different from even, like I mentioned, from faculty to faculty, content area to content area in some cases. We do know, for example, there are some community colleges that don't charge the students any fees and have either textbook loans or other things, but there are some that don't. Trying to get a handle on that the last 8 months has been extremely challenging. So in one school, they may be charging for that biology textbook, and in another one, they're not. And that, what we're saying is fundamentally that is wrong. They are a basic ed student first. If they're sitting in an honors biology class that's not college and the high school, they would not be charged for that textbook.
I'm going to recognize myself. So the concept of making dual credit available to all of our students, I think, is a good one, and certainly fits in with our equitable thing. And I recognize that the charge given by the legislature to OSPI in terms of doing it with an existing cost was one that you followed. Where I have significant pause is on the question of simply saying to school districts, and I think to higher ed, do this. We're not going to give you any more money, which I think is a quite significant issue. It doesn't stop here. I think it's a very bad principle, first of all, for us to buy into, because it could be applied to many things. I understand there's going to be a companion bill, and how all this plays out is unclear. Is that they're not totally known at this point? Michaela, is that correct?
Right. It was a little, if you watch the testimony, it was a little confusing because our bill has not, wasn't an amendment on on the bill that was heard this week. The bill that was heard this week was actually a bill from last year.
Right.
And so as I understand it, we will have an amendment on that existing bill and put our new dual credit language in, but that has yet to.
But will that deal with
finalize.
funding or not? You're talking about a phase-in, but I haven't heard.
Correct.
Yeah.
We will basically use the existing bill, put a striking amendment on it, put a committee amendment on it with our new language around dual credit. which is the phase-in that I just explained. We're also not opposed to the legislature providing funds for this.
Right. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that our position would be that we, as Julie suggested, that the concept, but with a very significant issue as to the funding, because certainly none of us would be opposed to the legislature doing it, but requiring it without any funding is, to me, a big deal. So that's just my personal view. And somebody else had their hand up. Holly? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think really pushing for additional funding for this is super important. I also think that if we are thinking about things with an equity lens, we require districts to, well, we don't require them. Districts do all kinds of things because inherently they know that it's not fair to allow access for one group of kids and not others. For example, there's very few districts, rural districts for sure, that don't have late buses anymore because they want all kids to be able to play football and volleyball and access after school tutorial help. Districts bear that cost, the state doesn't pay for it. It seems crazy to me that as a state board of education, we would say it's okay for districts to offer something that is such a huge benefit as dual credit, and it's only accessible to a few kids. In my district, small, rural, tax poor, blah, 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 blah. We've offered, we went college in the high school instead of AP about a decade ago. So we were on the forefront of that. And what we saw is that we had a lot of kids signing up for our college in the high school classes, and about 7 a year would access the dual credit. And they were families that could afford it. 2 years ago, my district said we just can't have this continue to happen, and we bit the bullet and made some sacrifices, and we pay for the tuition for all of our students. We went from 7 students to 70 students a year. We kind of went, yipe, that it was, that was the barrier. And so to say that something like dual credit is available to our families that can pay for it, that could probably do a better, with less impact to their family, or at least it's possible, they could pay for their student to go to college. Like the students this is supposed to impact, we can't access it. I don't know, that's not right. Whether there's additional money or not, that's not right.
I want to make sure that we have time for the other bills as well. So one, MJ?
I really appreciate that perspective, Holly. It's a tough one because, you know, I'm sitting here trying to kind of go through the impact or unintended consequences that could happen. The other part of this, I think, is that where, okay, if this money is going to come from districts, what programs are going to suffer and what other supports? And so, you know, as you point out, it's a very important opportunity and access that we want for every student. And yet, you know, it's not going to come out of, you know, it's not going to fall off the trees. So where is it going to come from? And I think that's what those unknowns, and obviously every district is going to be different depending on what they've been doing. And so that's the tension that I have in trying to go understand how to advocate on this.
So Jaylee, I'm sorry, we got to go ahead.
I just want to say one thing. You know, budgets are values. Budgets explain what your values are. We think we have given a timeline that allows districts and the community colleges to pivot to this. And so as districts are thinking about planning ahead, given a whole transition year to think about where is that money coming from. But when you look at, and I will make sure Randy has it, when you look at the gaps that currently exist between our non-low income and low income students, it is apparent that the problem that Holly just laid out exists everywhere.
Okay, so Jaylee and Randy, do you have sufficient information, a nuanced position, I think, on this is where we're?
I think so. I feel confident we can go in and provide some feedback to the legislators as they deliberate on this. So,
okay.
Great. Okay. So moving on then to another key bill. This one's called Concerning the Administration of State Education Agencies. It's House Bill 2269 with a companion in the Senate 6105. This bill has 3 parts to it. The first part allows the superintendent of public instruction to appoint a designee to serve in their place on a few different boards, including the State Board of Ed, so very, very relevant to you all. The second part allows for the transfer of State Board of Ed and ESD election administration responsibilities from OSPI, transferring them to WASDA. And then the third part eliminates the school facilities citizen advisory panel and adds citizen members to the technical advisory group. This bill, as far as position, we are concerned about the broad title of it, so we're going to be watching it closely. When the title is this broad, there's the potential that other things could get added to it as it goes along, if it aligns with the title and intent of the bill. So it's definitely something we want to watch closely. As far as position, we would suggest being neutral and available to provide information, but wanted to open it up for board input.
So this is when we're in the middle, or central, along with OSPI. I have some views. Others want to weigh in? Miriam?
I'm trying to figure out how to formulate this. So it would in essence take away the committee that the state board has right now, which is the Citizens Advisory Committee. And I guess my fundamental question is, what problem are they trying to solve here by doing that?
Right. So what we've heard so far is that, first of all, just to clarify, the board's role in the group is to appoint members to it, and then we have a member who serves on it.
That's me.
Right.
I know that.
Right. And from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the two groups have been meeting together already. And so I think that this is seen as being for efficiency's sake of putting the two groups together. Also, to put on your radar, there are other statutory references to the citizens group that give it certain responsibilities. And so there could be a need for a technical cleanup there, because those references would, if you remove that group, then what happens to the other places where that group is referenced? So there is a question there of what would the, I think the idea was, though, that you could get rid of the citizens group and add citizens to the other group and kind of combine in a way so as for efficiency's sake. And this is yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Pardon? Yeah, Michaela. No, but I'm gonna weigh in here. Okay. So I have significant concerns about this. The bill has three aspects. One is the voting aspect. I think we're okay with that. May make sense. The issue of the designee, I think, has some long-term consequences, and we want to think about that. I'm not sure, it has nothing to do with the individuals involved, but it's a pretty significant change. But the third one, which has ironically nothing to do with the first two, it essentially eliminates the citizen advisory group. It combines the two, but these are very different groups. One is a technical and the other is citizens, which we have their input. There is a view, I think, I don't want to channel OSPI, but I've heard it expressed that this advisory group is not effective as it is. To my mind, however, it is a mistake to eliminate it altogether, because I think that the capital facilities are very important, often not given the attention they should be, and the knitting together of providing human services with the capital services is important. And what I would suggest our position be that this third section be taken out, and there be an opportunity in the coming year for OSPI, WASDA, and State Board and others to work together. If the present structure is deemed to be not effective, then let's figure out an effective structure on the question of citizen input for K-12 capital construction. I think the answer is not to throw it overboard, but to reconstitute. So that would be my suggestion. And then Michaela, and then somebody else, and Holly, and
Yeah, I mean, you captured it perfectly. This is about efficiency, government efficiency. The group is already meeting. This was came from advice from our capital projects to try and create some efficiency in this. We are not eliminating citizen members. In fact, it's part of the bill to include citizen members on that group, but have it function how it's actually currently functioning, which is the two groups are meeting simultaneously. So it's to eliminate in statute an additional group.
Miriam and Holly. Oh, Holly first.
So I would push back on the efficiency piece and say we call it an advisory group, but quite frankly, the structure of the way those meetings are held, there's not a lot of room of advice. So I think the problem is not with the fact that there's a citizen advisory committee, it's more of how the committee is used. And so that's really the problem. I think it's a structural problem in the way the meetings are held, and that advice is not structured for citizens to give advice, quite honestly. And so whether it's one group or one, combining the two or keeping them separate, it wouldn't change the fact that citizens really don't have access to, they're not soliciting advice from the citizens during those meetings. So that's a different problem.
Holly?
Yeah, before I speak, point of clarification, Jaylee, what are the 3 boards that this would change the superintendent's voting to? It could be a...
The designee. It is the Workforce Training and Education Coordinating Board, the State Board, and help me with the third one.
The traffic safety.
Traffic safety.
These are the last 3 places in statute where it was not an opportunity to have a designee.
So he could have a designee currently on the Natural Resources Board?
Yep.
So there are 3 parts which are different, and I guess somebody else wants to speak. I'm sorry?
Oh.
Holly.
I guess I'm just really struggling with the fact, and it would be really interesting to me to know what happens in other states in terms of whether the state superintendent can have a designee on the State Board of Education, or is indeed the state superintendent always a member of a State Board of Education. I guess I'm struggling. Michaela, I love you, and I'm so glad you're sitting at the table. But just in terms of on paper, moving forward into the future, I think I'm really struggling with the idea that the state superintendent is not the voting member. When I look at the makeup of this board, and probably we're not unique, but we are either appointed or elected. All of the voting members are appointed or elected, and a designee would be neither appointed nor elected. But more, it's just the visual of the state superintendent not being the voting member, that could be a designee of that person's choosing moving forward. And thinking back into the past as well, I'm super happy with the current situation, but that might not be true in the future. And we wouldn't have any control over that.
Randy? Oh, Jan had an issue.
Just coming onto the board and looking from outside in, I think the participation of OSPI on the board is, even as an outside in look, is essential for the that sense of teamwork. Like, we can work together, and it's a direct communication and deliberation on important decisions. I think to remove it once removed would kind of just lessen that sense of working together. I think it's a key position.
Randy and then Mary, I believe. Randy's passing, goes to Mary.
I'm also speaking as a brand new person coming on and, from the outside looking in. It's been mentioned already this morning that what we value is what we put resources into, and time is also a resource. And I think it's really critical as an education entity, the perception of who is sitting here, and it being the superintendent, going back to, again, where are our priorities? What do we value? Where are we putting our time? And with all of the issues that are coming up that we're in the middle of facing, again, as an outsider looking in and just being a part of this, I think that that's a really critical thing to be considering, who's at the table. And again, it has nothing to do with individuals. I'm talking about the office and the position.
Just looking around to other members before I recognize Holly again. Holly.
So listening to both Jan and Mary, I think I want to clarify my position, because Jan, you said something really important, and that is that working together and that communication and having OSPI at the table here moving forward is really important. And I do think that having a designee moving forward makes it more likely that OSPI will always be at the table and represented at the table. And so I think the current situation is great. I'm really glad Michaela is here and that OSPI is at the table. But Mary, also agreeing with you that in terms of the voting piece of this, I think it's really important that that voting member remain the superintendent of public instruction. So I don't know if there needs to be any change to continue doing what we're doing now, but this is
So Randy, on this question of the designee, would it be, or Jay Lee, I guess, or could our position be that we recognize the issue, we would, for policy reasons going forward, prefer the present situation continue, but we recognize that there are issues involved in some way like that. I don't know how it would be essentially another position.
Right, and I think there are some complexities at play here that might warrant additional discussion. So we might want to bring it back to the Ledge Committee for a little bit further discussion, if that's okay.
And there, of course, there are three parts of the bill. So on the designee question, your suggestion is we need to think about that a little further. Randy, do you want to?
Well, I think I agree on that. I think the discussion is the reason I would recommend we remain neutral on that question. But because I don't know that there's 100% alignment, and I don't know that we have an alternative that other than stay the same. But there are challenges in that model also, especially in the longer term. One thing that what you pointed out, Holly, what was occurring to me is that I wonder if the words in that section were appointee of the superintendent rather than designee, if that makes a difference. Because, the superintendent is a statewide elected official and could appoint somebody. So, yeah.
You're thinking of continuity, Randy, is that?
Well, yeah, then it maintains that appointed or elected relationship.
MJ?
Mm-hmm. One of the things I know we might be short on time, and so I just want to make sure that I don't think we have legislative committee set up to meet, and I think that is something very critical, and we've kind of changed our process a little bit around that. And so I do think that before we leave here today, I'd like to at least get our next meeting set up, because we know how fluid these things can be, and they can change rapidly and quickly. And I want to make sure that we've got that function. I know there's 3 of us here today that are on the Ledge Committee right now, and we just want to make sure that we're using that.
Okay. If you can caucus, because we're going to have some time this afternoon before we go up to the Hill to talk about committees, so you can maybe suggest your way forward. So before we move to the rest of the bill, so on the designee question, Jay Lee, Randy, do you have sufficient information at this point, subject to getting more discussion, or do you think we need to discuss it more today?
I think Holly has one.
Okay, And then the other part that I raised about the capital committee, I'm looking around at my fellow board members, is that what I suggested, is that something that board members support, or is this something that I mean, my ego's not in this, but I didn't hear much reaction. Are we seeing thumbs up on that?
Could I restate what I think I heard, which
Yes.
would be our position would be to ask the legislature to provide more time for us to evaluate that and potentially reconstitute it at a later time?
This is not saying that the present situation is, with the Capital Advisory Committee, is what it should be. That rather that, and I read the bill a little differently than Michaela does in terms of what it does. It really does fundamentally change it changes the composition. For example, there were previously designees and so forth. But I think I don't think we can provide an alternative. I think what should happen, because this is not a necessary part of the bill, is to take out, it's part 3, it's completely self-contained, with the understanding that the agencies will work together to see if there's a proposal for an effective citizen input bill on the important capital issues. That's what I meant. So it's not to ignore the problem, but rather not this year. Jan?
And briefly, I would acknowledge that efficiency is agreed to, that we would like efficiency. I would want efficiency, but how do we do that?
Yeah. So I'm looking around, because this is one where we have to, I think we do need to take a position on it. Okay, all right. Bill?
Yeah, I guess I've been back and forth on this one for a while, and I'm all for lean management as well, obviously. Make things more efficient makes complete sense. I balk and hesitate at the elimination of something that's already been established. So I guess where I'm coming from is that if we can really make sure that it's more of a transition rather than an elimination, maybe is kind of what I'd be more comfortable with, that sort of language. But
and to my mind, it's not so much efficiency as effectiveness. We want an effective citizen input that's really going to provide a way for on these important capital issues. And to what Harry was saying, how the meetings are held is probably less important than the structure. And the structure might be completely different. But we need some time on that, I think. And okay, so thumbs up. Okay. And Mary, did you want to say something else? Okay. And we can run on a little bit. We're cutting into Margarita's time, I know. But we also, so one more, is there one more you want to deal with, or two?
I can move very quickly through. The rest I can just kind of put on your radar, I think. We covered the 2 top priority ones. A few that I want to put on your radar, there is a bill awarding diplomas posthumously, Senate Bill 6092. This requires school districts to issue a diploma to a deceased student at the request of the parent or guardian if the student died during their senior year and had been on track to complete the requirements for graduation. So I know the board has been involved in a family situation that has kind of led to this legislation. So just wanted to keep that one on your radar. Another one, just a couple things that are more like a wait and see, just to keep on our radar. We discussed yesterday about the staffing enrichment work group, and so we'll keep an eye to see what comes out of that, the legislation that will go along with the work group recommendations. We talked about that issue at length, and so we'll discuss that more. And then also on the horizon is regarding the issue of credit waiver schools and the need for funding flexibility, we're hoping to see something on that topic as well. So we'll keep you up to date.
Holly?
Sorry, I thought that was the end of it. I'm looking at this list and I'm wondering if it's appropriate to put one more on our radar when Jay Lee's done, or just ask him
Can you speak
straight up. It's pretty straightforward. So when Jay Lee's finished, can I raise one more bill in this list that I would love to put on our radar?
Okay.
And otherwise, I just wanted to very quickly cover some procedural things. And so I mentioned.
I'm sorry, before we do that,
Oh,
can maybe we should do it.
Sure.
And we may have some time this afternoon too, but, and we're cutting into Margarita's time, I know. So there also is the high school and beyond plan bill. Do you want?
Not a bill.
Not a bill or an idea?
So yeah, we had a budget request related to high school and beyond plan. We've talked to a couple legislators about that request. It was not picked up by the governor, but it is a small request, and we're continuing to talk to legislators who've expressed interest in that area and offering to work with them if they want to do something. And so, as you recall, the request is still on our legislative platform, and it's, what's the dollar amount? It's $275, I think, over 2 years to do some piloting of credit-bearing high school and beyond plan courses.
So stay tuned on that one. Okay, so Jaylee, you.
Yeah, all I was going to say, just to wrap up quickly, is you'll get weekly communications from me. Just let me know. We're also planning to have regular check-ins with the executive committee and the legislative committee. So we'll continue our discussions regularly and have those check-ins. So please do give me input though. Being new, I really want to know how I can be most effective in serving you all. So please do raise issues and let me know how I can be of help. And for those of you who are participating in our meetings this afternoon, I'll talk with you at lunchtime about the logistics for that. So thank you. Anything else?
Holly? Yeah.
Yeah, so the bill that I'm looking at is House Bill 1860, addressing lead in drinking water in schools. This hasn't come on our radar before. It's something I'm super concerned about personally and actually know quite a bit about. Essentially what this bill does, I just took a quick look at it. Essentially what this bill does is it requires schools to adhere more closely to a public health standard for lead than to a negotiated, it's called a maximum contamination level. The only safe level of lead from any scientific perspective is 0 parts per billion. The negotiated federal mandated action level for lead is 15 parts per billion. This bill would take it down to 5 parts per billion in schools. In other public buildings, you do something at 10 parts per billion. It's still not a safe level of lead, but it holds our schools more accountable to a public safety, especially you think about developing brains, et cetera, et cetera. So pretty passionate about this issue, and I think it is a tip of the iceberg issue in our state. Like we probably don't even want to know.
Yeah,
but this bill would mean that we would know.
Right. So tip of the iceberg is a good explanation. This is a bill that has actually been around for a while, and it has implications because testing and so forth. So I think we need to know more about this before we would take a position, but it's certainly an important issue. Yeah. Jen, and then we need to wrap up.
Just very briefly on the side of the private sector, the independent and other schools, early learning is important. These early learning bills are very important for that group.
Jaylee, is there more, Orlando, you want to? Okay, we're going to, after our public testimony, we're going to talk about committees. So that would be an appropriate time for, if the Ledge Committee can convene during the break, and then we can talk about, I want Randy to lay out, please, how you see this during that discussion about how this is going to work during the session, because it's very fast moving. Okay, thank you so much. Very efficiently done. Unless there's more. Okay. So Margarita, unfortunately, we've cut into your time. We have, let's see, we don't have anybody signed up. Okay, well, public comments at 9:30, but let's, why don't you proceed if you're ready? And then we, if nobody's signed up, then we can give you a little more time. And I can't remember, is this the first time that you've, no, you second, yeah, you presented before. Okay, thank you so much. And there's a handout, I believe, is that correct?
Yeah.
In the extra materials with some color.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so hello. All of you know me by now. I'm Margarita Amezcua. Today I will be presenting on Migrant Student Opportunity to Dream. But first I'm gonna have a little student update really quick. So there's a couple pictures, you can see them up close in your little materials, but just little things going on in my life. Up there is a picture of a concert that I went to. It was fun. I really like music and concerts and everything to do with that, so that was fun. Spent New Year's and Christmas with my family. We all dressed up and went to go see lights. It was pretty. You can see them all up there. They're really amazing. And then the bottom right corner, you can see a couple of my friends and me, we had a little pep assembly right before winter break. So that's the picture there. And then a couple things that are happening lately. My school recently started a club kind of called Hope Squad. It's based out of Utah, and what it is a suicide prevention kind of program that we adopted. Basically, all the members of the school fill out a survey, and they put like 3 or 4 names of people that they can always come to talk to, or that they come to when they have a problem. And so there's about 16, 20 of us that just do different things to kind of create a positive culture in our school. And during Suicide Prevention Week, we're gonna do a whole bunch of things like giving out little lifesavers and things like that. But a couple of hobbies that I recently taken up. Up there, you can see a picture of me right there by the mirror. It's mirror painting. It's with acrylic paint, and it's really simple, but it takes some time, and I like it. You see a picture of a book because I really like to read. Recently read The Outsiders. Love that book. If you haven't read it, read it. Amazing. I cried. And then up at the top center of the page, you can see a picture of my school's lunchroom. And what it was is a multicultural fair. And we did I'm Mexican, so we did a little dance to represent kind of our culture. And something that I've recently done for no reason is make a bunch of playlists on the bottom left for no reason, just to listen to a lot of music. So yeah. Next one. And then something that I really wanted to include in here was AWSL, obviously me and Autumn are on the Student Voice and Advocacy Committee. And what that is basically just trying to really heighten student voice and make it known that there is a group of students out there that care and know what they want and know how to get there. And so a couple of things that are on our platform right now for this year that we're really looking to expand is overall 4 main topics: is mental health, school security, resources, and education. So some of the things that are included in there are going to be more at a local level, such as dress code things and things like that. But just putting it out there that there is a group of students that know what they want and are aware of social things going on and know that they're going to change it. Next one's Parker. So migrant students and their opportunity to dream. Currently, policies in place, different things that have been created to aid our students is HB 1079. One of them is that allows eligible undocumented students to pay in-state tuition at Washington State colleges and universities. Different things that you have to be in order to take part in that, but that is something that has been aided and has helped a lot of students. Real Hope Act, also known as the WAFSA, which is an application similar to FAFSA, but for undocumented students. And it allows them to receive financial help in order to better their chances at attending a post-high school schooling. And then next one. So, yes?
I just want to interrupt because I want to shout out to Ricardo, who was very much involved in both of those initiatives you just mentioned, 1079 and Real Hope Act.
Merci for Ricardo. But about these 2 bills, I'm going to take this really personally, this entire presentation. I just hope you know that it's very close to my heart, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I hope you all see that. So originally for my state board interview, because we did have like a whole application process, and we had to present for 5 minutes, I think it was, and it was on ELL, ESL students. And it's something, Autumn personally told me that that was one of the main discussions they had while they were discussing who was going to be on the board. They talked about someone who would bring something new to the table that would represent a new group of students. And I take that very seriously. So, because that is what I know, that is who I represent to my peers, and something that I value a lot because it's something that needs to be heard more often. So in order to kind of get a more full picture on ESL students, all week during, I don't remember when this was, but I stayed in ESL classrooms for a whole week. I just went around, went to different classrooms, different age groups. But it was just a really, really interesting thing. I just had never experienced it like that, because I know how to advocate for myself, and I know how to do that because of my home life, and I know how to do that. But seeing students that might not have the privilege of having their parents at home, not having them consistently there, having to take up another job, having to take care of their siblings because their parents aren't there, just things like that that I don't know, very close to my heart because I didn't realize. But being in these classrooms, I got to talk to them, hear their stories, and kind of see where they're at. That because I hadn't done that. I knew what the problem was, and I knew that I had to go, but I'd never done it. So I heard stories upon stories of people. Can you, Parker, please? Okay, so stories full of things that I could never, that a lot of us could never even imagine. Stories filled with, as you can see on the slide, isolation, loneliness, feeling like an outsider, feeling terrified, humiliated, and made to feel inferior, not on purpose. It's just the simple act of not being able to communicate that automatically, oh, you don't understand. That's just horrible. Something that I really wanted to highlight, that I put up there, was I asked them how they were feeling when they first showed up, and they said, like, I was a wild animal roaming free, but then got locked in a cage. So just take that in. But it's just, I don't know. I take this so seriously because students, humans that just feel like they don't belong, you know, so many of us could never imagine any of this. And yet here we are, students filled with dreams that they don't even know exist, potential, so much potential. And just because they can't tell you what they see, where they would have imagined themselves, and they don't see that. So I just think that's a really important part. Next one. Okay, so our mission statement as a state board, I think we all know it, but something that I really wanted to highlight was personalizes learning for each student and values diverse cultures. Values diverse cultures. Diversity to me, what I think, it's not diversity until it's accepted. Once we all go, yes, this is okay. You are valued because of who you are. You are valued because you speak a different language, and that's a beautiful thing. Congratulations. That we don't see that, and we don't see the whole student, and we don't see the whole picture. And it's heartbreaking to see so many kids full of genuine potential, genuine intelligence. I bet you they could do this 10 times over. And in Spanish, amazing things that people just don't see, that ignore and that get overlooked because they don't understand. What we do not have, all of these, the HB 1079 and the I don't know what it's called, the other act, those things, they're amazing things that have helped tons of students, amazing students, and it's great. It's great intention, great things happening because it does help. But things that aren't addressed as a student's esteem, once they can't take full advantage of those opportunities if they don't see themselves even getting there, even getting the opportunity to receive those. Right now, they're in a classroom. They're sitting staring blank faces at a screen, learning how to say what they had for dinner last night. Because that's going to get them where they want to be, right? That's going to get them where they want to be. We're missing something. We're missing empathy for these stories, for these life experiences that come with an emotional toll. They're telling me these things with tears in their eyes. And they're like, but I'll just stick to what I know and stay here. there's no room for them to grow. There's no room for them to succeed at all. And we're just okay with that. We talk so often about whole student, about emotional safety, about mental health, but we don't take in this huge group of people that is so important and so vital to our system. And it's just, we're not seeing them. We're not taking in everything that they could do, that they could have. And it's not right. They need encouragement. They need inspiration. They need to see someone in their classroom that has succeeded. Right now, there is no one in their lives that has gone ahead and done something. They just see struggle after struggles. The only thing they have left is to give up. And we need to give them something that creates hope. We need to create that one-on-one communication between teachers and those students that makes them grow into something. That was not all I wanted to say. I just really want to highlight about different circumstances that each of these students goes through. I would have typically put slides up about each student and each thing that they told me, but I just did not feel that was right. This needs to be more than a story on a slide. This needs to be more, much, much more than just that. They go through so many things. Imagine being in a classroom and automatically, just because you don't know how to explain yourself, you don't know how to elaborate what you're feeling, what you've been through, you're automatically looked at as inferior. You're treated, it's horrible. My best friend is from Brazil. He came to the United States in 5th grade, and he spent the entire year not saying a word. No one said anything to him. He didn't know anything. I met him 6th grade year, and I forced him to talk to me because I'm kind of that type of person. If you don't want to talk to me, then I'm gonna make you talk to me. And so I got him, and I tried to get him somewhere, and we got him some help. But the fact that he couldn't get that on his own, he would have been overlooked. And now he's succeeding. We're juniors now, and he is doing great. But if he hadn't gotten that help, if someone hadn't stepped up and been like, he needs this, if someone hadn't done that, he'd be in the same spot. He would have just been put to the side in lower level classes just because, oh, he doesn't get it. And that's not right. Not at all. Thank you.
Wow, I'm processing here. I just want to thank you, by the way, for reminding us about the human element here and for being passionate, because sometimes in our discussions we talk about statutes and WACs and rules, but it's about our students and real human beings who come from different circumstances. I'm sorry. So questions, comments? Randy? Yeah.
So, Margarita, you have an ability and some extra expertise in navigating systems that some of your peers don't have. I'm going to put you on the spot. I want to know, are you going to graduate with Sealed by Literacy? And if so, is that because of your own advocacy or because someone helped you from the school?
My own. I was raised in a household where it was very much, do what you need to do. If you fall, get back up, keep going.
Yeah.
So at school, yeah, I had to look up, how do I do this? I am going to graduate with the biliteracy because I took a test and it was this whole process, but yes.
But you had to find the test. They didn't come to you and say, hey, Margarita, you should do this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, MJ.
Wow, Margarita, I mean, really, that was, you tell a story and bring the human element to it so greatly. I just really appreciate it. And I think you help remind us that we can, this was said earlier, that we can talk policies and we can talk, a lot of stuff, but if this is what matters, and these students are what matter. And I think you bring a voice to a lot of students that often don't get heard, right? And so really appreciate that perspective. And I ask you to keep doing that and keep questioning and keep bringing up, hey, remember this student. What does this mean for this student? And so I think what I'm trying to do is, I was listening to your stories, is go, why is this happening? Why do these students have no hope or feel like they're just, kind of getting by, but they're not engaged in their heart is what I heard from you. It's like, they're getting this information presented to them, but it's about what they ate for dinner last night versus something they're passionate about, right? And so what are those barriers? Like, what can we do? What do we need to be doing? I was thinking about, I don't think you were on the board yet, but last year when we had the Equity Summit, here we had Jeff Duncan Andrade, and when he went back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And that's what I was thinking about when you're talking about these students, is there those needs, those, connection needs, those relationship needs, those relevance, like, this is relevant and engaging for me. It sounds like we're missing that, or these students anyway that you're talking about, it sounds like they're not getting that opportunity. And so I don't know, have you thought through like, this is what we need to do different, or is it like a culture survey? And so we can identify, hey, these students don't feel engaged. I'm just kind of trying to rack my brain because I want to camp here for a second and go, we need to fix this. This is not okay. It's not okay for us to keep doing, the status quo and this continuing to happen. So I don't know, have you thought through any things like this, here's some things that we need to do different?
I think it's a really hard thing to do because obviously this is a big thing that isn't going to be solved overnight, but it all starts like the hierarchy, it does start with basic needs. They're not worried about school. They're not worried about doing their homework. They're not worried about any of that. They're worried about, okay, I'm going to come home, see my little siblings. What am I going to feed them? They're going to be like, oh, is my parent going to come home today? Are they going to make it safe home? They're not thinking about school like that. Not that it's not a priority, but it's just not. It's not going to happen. They're not going to have time to think about that. So I honestly have no idea, but it's a basic need thing. I think that's the first thing that needs to be addressed, because if they can't go home and be at peace doing homework really quick before the next day and getting a good night's rest because they have to go to work too, then I think that's the first step, because they can't do anything if that's not correct first.
Real quick.
Yeah, we have MJ and then Jan and then Hariam.
I think, so to me, that says that in our system, we're valuing things, but maybe we're not valuing some very important things like basic needs. Like, where is that valued in our system is what I hear you saying. Would you think, like, if we could assess that and value that first, maybe we would get at where they're at and then be able to build those relationships or supports or whatever else needs to happen from there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Jan, did you have something? If you pass, you do. Yeah.
I'll narrow it to one. Thank you to two. And I'm sitting here from the perspective of both someone who's worked in public schools and in the private sector. And I know the culture of a school and school leadership is so important in that one-on-one, I care about my kids. So I think school culture is really important. And then secondly, in my one thought, that connection to community resources. Who's down the street? I know in University Place, close to where I live, there's a really strong partnership with an after-school program that is in a church close by. There's Big Brother program. There's wonderful things, a homework connection, lots of kids going there that were underserved. So I'm just thinking, where do we find those one-on-ones when the capacity within the school is really working hard? Some are working hard, some aren't. But how can you even in your role, what are those other community connections that all schools, kids, people in a community can help work together? Thank you so much for bringing your heart and your energy to this. Thank you.
Hariam?
So Margarita, you bring up excellent things that actually cut across lots of areas, not just, you approach it from the ESL, English as a second language kind of perspective, but I think we could pull that out and put a different group in there and have exactly the same kinds of things. And I keep going back to the fundamentals and we say, well, what can we do about this? I think if you strip away everything, the most fundamental thing or the thing that's in common with all of those is that not only are we not thinking in terms of meeting those basic needs, I think you're totally right there, but I think it's that relationship piece. That's the pivotal thing. That isolation could be solved if I knew there was a person. So like what you're doing with your suicide prevention of these are people that I go to. But every kid, regardless of where they are in the school, should have an adult in the school that connects with that individual student. It could be the custodian, it could be the secretary. It doesn't have to be a teacher. It just has to be an adult that says, I'm here for you. And once kids know that, the isolation kind of goes away, and some of the other things that you listed out, those needs could be met. So I think if we strip away everything, get back to, you know, the relationship piece. And I think that's the hard way. If you're going to change the culture, change it from the perspective of the relationship.
Sorry, Mary?
Thank you, Margarita. As you were talking, it was taking me back to listening to stories from students in my district who've had very similar life experiences and school experiences. And totally echo Hariam's comment about relationships and actually seeing our students and who they are and the assets that they bring. And my question is, we spend a lot of time looking at data, and data is important, but we tend to forget that there are faces and names and people and individual behind those data points. And so I actually appreciate you saying you didn't want to put slides up with somebody's story, and the approach you took about this is, as a system, we're not doing what we need to do. But there are individuals behind it. And I'm wondering, is there a way, because this is being recorded, that this portion of it could be made accessible or highlighted as some type of a cut to send out to our legislators? And as a reminder that while you're looking at RCW numbers and WAC numbers and graphs and charts, that what we're really talking about are individuals whose personal education pathways and their personal life pathways are absolutely being impacted every day by the issues that you were raising.
Bill and then Holly.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for teaching us today. We all learned from you today, so thank you. I want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. At one point you said that your peers don't have someone they can mirror their lives after, someone they can look up to. I would disagree with that because I think you're that for a lot of students. So keep doing what you're doing, you know, and you know, you can be the role model for a lot of your peers, I think. So thank you.
So I was also touched. Thank you. And it was hard, but part of what was happening is that I was touched, but I was also convicted as a classroom teacher and as a policymaker. And I was thinking about what are the specific actions that as a classroom teacher I could do differently, and what are the policies that could support me in those actions. And it's the same old thing, people. It's the same old thing. I don't know where this idea that class load doesn't matter comes from, you know? I think about some students that I have, and I won't tell their stories here because I don't have permission to do that, but students that are learning English in my biology class. And I realize I have not made personal connections with them. I'm supporting them. I'm doing all the things biology teachers are supposed to do. I'm translating it in Google Translate. But I really don't know them as people or what they're passionate about because I'm so busy Google translating it. And I was thinking about when in my practice have I really been able to know my students' stories? Because I've been there before. And it really is when I have somewhere between 80 and 100 students. That sounds like a big number to know everybody's stories, but it's possible to really personally know my students, up to about 100 of them. I currently have 168 students, and I see them each every other day because we went to 4x4 because we want our students to have an opportunity to get 24 credits. With 168 of them working as hard as I could, it really took me until November just to know their names. And I still kind of take a deep breath before I say some of the last names, and I'm in January. So that was one piece that I just wanted everyone to think about. What are we asking classroom teachers to do? Why is it as a classroom teacher, I'm sitting here so convicted when I'm in a system that gives me 170 students? So that's one piece, not making excuses, but just pondering. And then the other thing that you said that really struck me is that students need to see someone who's succeeded. And as policymakers, that's another big piece on our plate. What are we doing to put teachers and instructional assistants and principals and school board members that reflect the communities that they serve, or even that reflect a small minority of the community that they serve? So those students always have somebody that they see has succeeded that shares a similar story. And I don't think we're doing enough with that either.
Just kind of follow up to Holly's comment made me kind of tie some of this together, what we talked about and some of the bills that we talked about today. So you're talking about relationships and you're talking about caseloads and how many students can you connect with in a reasonable, with a certain number of caseload. And one of the bills we were talking about today was talking about asking more from districts, right, to supply more. And I'm not saying it's not a worthy thing, but if we require districts to take more resources to pay for something, which is a great thing, is it not going to probably increase the caseloads? These are the kind of things that I think somehow we've got to, how do we, and again, I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't do that, but it all has an impact around students and these relationships. And because we put data up here, because we put test scores up here, and we honor those things as the big blingy thing and the accountability, and we don't have, unless you tell me otherwise, where we have this, where do we have relationships and student, well-being as that thing that we're grading schools on? We're going to continue, unfortunately, I'm afraid to devalue this human relational element. And I am just challenged with how can we keep this at the paramount? To me, this is like a child in a womb. Like, we need to protect this of everything that we do. We need to protect the student and the relationships with the student above everything we do. And I think that would help with equity. I think that would help with a lot of things. We still need to challenge ourselves around our policies that are inequitable. But if we're meeting students' basic needs first, then I think we're going to help a lot of things happen. But how can we do that as policymakers when we're looking at our policies and not, unfortunately, end up doing this unintended consequence, which I think we've done in the last, couple decades, unfortunately. So I don't know how to do that, but I'm challenged with it as well. So thank you again, Margarita.
Ryan.
Yeah, I also just wanted to say thank you, and it was an awesome presentation. I really appreciate your passion. From the time I first served on the Pasco School Board until now, I've said it before, I'll say it again, the students are really the best part of this board, and you really just drove that home today. Just being able to listen to you is a real gift. I think the thing that you did today was you reminded us of what's most important, and that's the students. And in fact, you even helped remind us of not only what our mission statement is, which you're right, we should know that pretty well, but you highlighted some pieces of that mission statement that are really most important, and the things that really resonate with you as a student, and the work that we have to do. So I thank you for being who you are, and just keep using that passion, both with the work you're doing at your school and the impact that's making on your fellow students, and your voice here, and that passion with us here, with legislators, with your students, is going to have a huge ripple effect, make a big difference. So thank you.
Anything else you want to say, Margarita? No. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Good job. Okay. So it's almost 9:30. Tammy, do we have anybody signed up? No. And I see every face in the room being familiar. So here's what I suggest. Why don't we use the time between now and say 20 of for a break? If someone comes for public testimony, then I will round people up and we'll reconvene. I think that's unlikely, but we do have to provide that opportunity if somebody does. So can we come at 9:40, and then we'll talk about the next agenda item is on committee and member updates, and we'll talk about that. Does that make sense? Okay, so 20 of, please. Come back. We have a hard stop at 10:30 because we need to transition to the standards board. And just in preparation for that, anything we should know about that before we roll in?
So we will have, so during the programming, there'll be a brief PowerPoint that Alex and I will put in front of you just to talk about what our sort of shared priorities are. And then there's going to be time for you to talk with members of both the Standards Board and the Professional Educator, the Para Board and the Standards Board.
So the PowerPoint will set the table for our discussions?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll go through that first and then give you lots of time for discussion. There'll be a little bit of moving around.
Right.
The other thing this morning, before we leave, there's two other things we want to do. Jaylee's going to put up the list of legislative meetings that are up for this afternoon. And then we also are going to encourage folks to do the meeting survey before you leave as well. So
okay, so let's see if we can get through the next segment by 10:20. I don't want to be too much of a stickler for agenda, but we do have a tight schedule here. And I just remind the members that the meeting with the Standards Board is an annual requirement, and it's our opportunity to interact. And so this is a relationship building, is that correct, rather than decision making? Yeah, okay. So on the agenda, we were going to talk about the norms and also mission, vision, values. And here's how I suggest that we proceed on this, and this is subject to board member input, of course. So on the norms, we have them on your materials on page 55, a draft, which has been prepared by the Norms Committee, which actually expires this month. There is also in the additional materials, the marked up version of it. What I'm suggesting on that is that we deal with this at the next board meeting. We have to deal with it soon, because if we're going to self-evaluate against our norms, then we need to have the norms in place. The draft on page 55 has additional language which was proposed by Holly regarding, it was taken from our mission and vision. What I suggest on that is that we not include that change, but rather in September that we deal with any changes that we need to make on our mission, vision, and value statement. And Mary has a suggestion as well, but I think it'd be wiser for us to consider these things as a whole in September. There may be other changes as well that has implications not only for Anyways, that's how I suggest. Am I seeing nods? Is that okay? And
Please clarify again. You're saying, so we've got these two versions right now that are in front of us. So
Yeah.
you're saying we've got the one in the book and then the one that was in the supplemental
yeah,
materials.
the one in the supplemental material is just shows the track changes. Okay, the one in the book would be the one that we would consider, except that if you look at it, there are 3 lines that are that are underlined in the book on page 55, which we would take out because we would not incorporate the vision in the norms.
Okay. And now, so it's that, this is the version.
Am I correct, Randy?
Yeah, that's so. Both versions are the same. The one with all the markup was just so that you could identify the changes more easily, and the one change I left tracked in the version that was in the book was the change to mission or vision, because that would require a change to the vision statement as well. That language comes from the vision statement, and what Peter is suggesting is that we remove that change and wait until we update the vision statement, which would come at the September meeting potentially. And then I think the way I'm thinking about that is if we update the vision or mission statement, we could in the resolution direct staff to update it everywhere else we use it, because we use it in a lot of places.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons is it's also in printed material. So if anybody has, if that's okay, if anybody has additional comments about the norms, they should go to Randy before the next, and to all of us, but through Randy, because we will consider that at our next meeting. And then, Mary, I will transmit your suggestion, and we'll consider that as part of in September, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I just would like to make a comment about what my suggestion was.
Absolutely.
Again, as a newbie looking in at things and what I was seeing on the draft vision and mission and looking at the values is that equity is listed as the first value, but that word and that concept is not incorporated in either the vision or the mission.
And then Holly has suggested some language around student health and so forth. So, but and I think those are both valuable insights, but there may be others. Okay, is that okay with everybody? Mary, you okay? Yeah, okay. This is not to disregard what you guys are saying, but do it together. Yeah.
So is the proposal to wait until September to do that? For these changes, to adopt them?
So the proposal is on the norms we would adopt next meeting. Okay?
Next meeting.
Okay. Changes to the mission and vision, we would stick to our annual cycle of the retreat, where we would consider any changes to our mission and vision, including these 2 suggestions.
And that's our normal process to do that annually?
Hard to say what a normal process is. It's the process that we're trying. We every September at the retreat, we do revisit. We look at our 5-year plan. And we consider that's when we have done those changes in the last 2 years at least. We don't have to do it that way. I'm looking for thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah, okay. So now we have, let's see. Do we want to do committee reports? Do we want to, I guess we need update, or do we just want to have members talk about things that have happened in the last few months that they want to share with our fellow board members? Do we really need committee reports? I don't think so, but, legislative committee, you've met and. That's a yes.
I don't know if you can call that just a meeting. We're just trying to get ourselves organized a little bit, Peter. And I think I've just texted Patty. Hopefully we're going to be able to have a call-in meeting Tuesday morning. So we'd be kind of a little bit ready for really the real launch of all of this stuff that we just talked about. And then the other thing that we talked about is probably we should all pull up that committee charter and take a look at it and just make sure that Ledge Committee Executive Board, Jay Lee, you and MJ, like we're pulling on that same rope in terms of following that process that we've developed, because I think it's easy to get outside of that and we've done it before. So really having, as we move into learning that new rhythm, having that piece of paper like in front of us so none of us get outside of it.
Randy?
And you know, as we discussed yesterday, Peter has a call for interest in membership on the committees, and we're going to send the charters for all the committees out following the meeting today.
Sooner the better on that, because, yeah, especially if you're meeting on Tuesday. So in terms of board members letting me know. Okay. And then Randy, you're going to talk about the rhythm for January, February in terms of the Ledge Committee and the Executive Committee.
Yeah, so it might be good for the Ledge Committee to share what their cycle of meetings was, because I wasn't in that conversation, but the intent was to alternate on weeks when EC does not meet. And so we have another touch point with members.
Yeah, that's exactly what we talked, because I know we had talked about that as well. And so, and that's why we wanted to meet next week, since we have an executive meeting the following week. And so that is in sync with that.
So the other part of rhythm, and Jaylee mentioned weekly reports. So schedules come out from the legislature on Wednesday afternoons. It takes us a little bit of time to kind of sort through those and figure out what bills we are most concerned about. But we'll be communicating sometime on Thursday or Friday of the week prior to the schedule week.
Okay, so we have at 10:20, we're going to shift to our Hill schedule, but we have 15 minutes for members to share insights they've gained from contacts meetings. Anybody want to proceed? I'm sorry that the time got squeezed here, but Jeff.
So in the myriad of materials you find in your folder, you'll find one that is I didn't actually know it was going to be in there, but a report I gave to Randy and Peter about, I attended the National Science Teachers Association's regional conference in Seattle. And so I put together some observations, recommendations, possible actions. It's pretty long. If I could tickle your interest in looking at it, given all the other things you have to read, it was interesting to me to hear about what Shelton School District was doing in terms of how they've started to build using their natural sciences approach and field experience connected to sort of CTE and then on to leveraging high school academies. And so they've kind of done this real integrated sort of connection of academic courses and CTE courses and so on. And they were interested in sharing with others. So there are lots of things in there. In addition to that, they had a number of experts that were there. There was an interesting piece all about the power of, let's see if I can find one. The guy from Johns Hopkins talked about infusing of creativity into K-12 education, and it's linked to post-secondary success. You might want to look at that. There's a whole guy named Robert Schwartz from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, Jobs to the Future, did a very impressive thing about some of the myths around the low wage, high wage, and the education required for those things. And it might be really interesting to pursue some of that or take a look at that. Again, there were all kinds of recommendations about redesign of our systems for young people in terms of completing high school and how many credits they might have in the post-secondary. So this is all in here, so you can just read it at your leisure if you're so interested. I went to the climate change thing that OSPI is doing. And if you're not familiar with that, it's called Climb Time. I would encourage the board to take a look at that. That's, of course, the funding they received from the legislature, supported from the governor. And then I just want to conclude with, there was a panel of Washington State experts that talked a little bit about how, the theme of the conference was fostering a culture of science education. And they talked a lot about, so I think even though this is science, I think this connects to lots of other things we've talked about. You could take science out and put in something else. But the whole notion of mentorship and advocacy and collaboration, community engagement, effective communications, relationship building, and building resilience. Another speaker talked an awful lot about how the student population is changing, increasingly non-white, while broadening. So we have to broaden what constitutes science and do so in a cultural context. Talked a lot about encouragement and capacity building, identifying and removing barriers. And I love this, and we heard a great example in Margarita's talk today. It means adults have to step back and let students own some of their learning and listen to their messages and that sort of thing. And then I thought there was one speaker who was particularly practical, and it was useful to say, students or teachers have to have the opportunity to engage in NGSS practices. Science needs to be presented as a social endeavor, which reflects different cultures and views, and that science has a moral purpose. And 3, that students, everyone actually, needs to find their place in science. A culture of science meets students where they are, embraces their culture and sense-making efforts, and helps to elevate their understanding and efficacy, which necessarily means that we must eliminate institutional policies that are barriers to success. And then the last speaker I thought was important for us to hear, and it's not inside the K-12 system or even the K-16 system, said, think more broadly about science learning. Go beyond the classroom to see who influences your interest in science, make science lifelong, life-wide, life-deep. And early influences are parents, family, and out-of-school activities and places. This suggests we should have a connected science learning strategy in school and out of school for greater impact, and implies a broader thinking about the investments we make in science education, so it's not just in school and out of school. And the actual National Science Teachers Association has taken that to heart. They are no longer called the National Science Teachers Association. They are rebranding to be called the National Science Teaching Association. And the implication is both inside, outside of school, and so on. So if any of that tickles your interest, you can read more broadly about it in the piece that I put together for Randy and Peter.
Yeah, and it is an admirably complete and interesting document. So, yeah. Who else would like to?
Term paper.
Yeah, Randy.
So I just wanted to call out, so the board was a co-sponsor for an event at the Institute for Systems Biology, STEM Deep Dive that Jeff and Peter also attended. And that was a really interesting exercise there that we may actually want to bring back to the board. But in addition to that, it's an opportunity to see some of the connections in our system. And this is one of the real values of doing some of these kinds of events. So we serve on Career Connect Washington. We go to this kind of event where they're talking about next generation science center standards. There's a lot of overlap between these different things, and allows us to sometimes connect these pieces. We're also a co-sponsor for Pave the Way, and we had a presentation there on 1599 implementation with OSPI. And I attended another session there that was about competency mastery-based transcripting, and so again, another opportunity to see, and that was more of the higher ed perspective, but it's really important for us to kind of have that lens also when we're looking at some of these policies and thinking about where the students might land. We went to the WASDA annual conference and presented at those and a whole host of other conferences. So some members, I think members went to most of these meetings. Some were staff presentations, but many member presentations as well. So I want to thank the members who take the time to do that and provide those presentations to kind of expand our reach out with these various stakeholders and communities.
Can I just add for I only have two. The ISB thing, they actually showed us a very interesting tool they're using to help schools. My word tool, I don't know if they use that, to think about the powerful learning experiences they're providing for students. So I'm going to send one way or the other because it's cross-cutting. I think it meets some of the things we're interested in. And I sent it to Stephanie. So if somebody, or you can actually send an email to me, but she can send it to you as a PDF if you want. Following our protocol, I didn't send it out to everybody else. Right?
Thank you. Other members? MJ.
Well, like
Randy mentioned, there's been a lot. And so I'm not going to go through the list of the stuff that I've been at because it feels like a lot. But I just want to mention I went to the Big Picture Leadership Conference. They sponsored our participation fee, which was great. And we had a very strategic conversation there, which I think was very impactful. As we've heard, there's supposed to be a bill around the funding fix for our waiver schools. And I think that was just a really great opportunity to meet with those leaders, as well as some of the school leaders from the districts that have those waivers. And then also as part of that conference, I got to spend a couple hours at Highline and hearing how, I just had to share this, hearing how their model, by going to a competency-based model, has they have this unique thing happening that now they have so much interest from their community and their students that it's not serving as diverse of a demographics as it used to be. And so they're grappling with that, which, it's a good problem and a not so good problem, because they're getting a ton of interest and a lot of students from all across their district that want to come, but they're feeling like it's kind of a mission creep that they're not serving as many of the underserved populations as they set out to. And so I just think that was a fascinating conversation and reality to listen to, and to listen to administrators as well as the teachers and some of the students and how they're trying to deal with that. So I think that's something for us to keep close to, and absolutely totally enjoyed the WASDA conference, especially because I got to participate in the student presentation piece, and we kind of had Margarita was there on person and Autumn was there remotely, but we had a lot of great conversation, I think, with other student leaders in schools. And I hope that's something that, and Mary, I know you've participated with your students from your local school board, but there was a lot of those pieces that our student members weren't aware of as part of that conference. And I think that's a great potential connection point we can do, and networking with those other student leaders. So maybe we can have that more on our radar going forward.
Thank you. We have about 5 more minutes if anybody else wants to. I also went to several of these, but including the WASDA annual conference where we did a presentation. It was very well attended. Yeah. And I can't remember, see, it was you were there, and
Randy and
yeah, Holly, you weren't there. At any rate, great questions. And one reason I'm mentioning this, Alicia Strobel was there as well, and she took, because we got a lot of interesting feedback from the superintendents were there and board members about issues that they saw. So
around pathways.
Around pathways. I have to say that Alicia is really impressive, because she's been many places even before we do this. So she's really trying to build through multiple inputs, issues, ideas, because things surface. So it's a good thing. Good work, Randy, on your contractor selection.
Yeah, actually the team did that. I did not participate in this.
All right, good work, team. Yeah. Other comments here? We can, if not, we can transition to Jay Lee, who's going to give us our marching orders here. And then, Randy, do you want to do the survey too?
Yeah, that'll come right after.
Okay, so the other part that we want to leave time for, if we possibly can, is to, at the end here, 5 minutes for us to fill out the board evaluation. We have not had very good participation in the post-meeting evaluation. This last time we had 9 members who participated, and I'm not sure what that's all about, but I think it's important for me as chair to have feedback in terms of the meeting. I think it's very important for the staff to know what works, what doesn't. So we're looking at different ways of having better feedback, and Randy was suggesting we could just start that here. So go ahead, Jay Lee. Yes.
Just real quick, again, if for some reason what we're asking is, number one, that you fill it out. Please fill it out. If for some reason you don't find those questions meaningful or valuable for you, please give us that information as well. This is for the staff, also for the executive committee, and lining up agendas and discussion time and the chair. It really does impact. This is kind of one of our norms, our board norms, is that we want to hear from you through this. So that's our plea, and please give us feedback if it's not. If the questions could be better questions.
Go.
Okay, so as you heard, there's the joint lunch with PESB over at Water Street Cafe. That is scheduled to end at 12:30, so that gives us plenty of time. Parker, would you mind scrolling up to the table here? You all have received this handout. It has a map of the Capitol campus, and then the schedule here for the meetings. You'll see we already did several on Tuesday, and now these are the remaining ones for Thursday here. Our first one, they start around 1:30, 2 o'clock time frame, so there's plenty of time to go between lunch to get to the Capitol, and there's a variety of different transportation options available to you. So walking is, if you're up for a walk, it's easy to get there. Probably takes about 20 minutes, maybe 15, 20 minutes as a walk. There's also the Dash, which is a bus that picks up on Capitol Boulevard and runs pretty much every 10 or 15 minutes, I think. So it comes pretty frequently, and free bus, so you can just hop on that and get off at the Capitol. And there may be staff vehicles. Do we have?
Sorry. Are you going to do a shuttle service at all, Tammy? I didn't put you on the spot.
We have a minivan that's going to have equipment, and we're going to drop it off at the office. So we'll be available at 1 o'clock to take it up if we need to.
Yeah, so if anybody needs that option where walking or bus isn't going to work, just connect and we can make another arrangement. So the plan for these meetings, they're really introductory, kind of getting to know you meetings, wanting to connect and share about the board's legislative platform. I do have handouts available that you can hand out, but most likely they're going to ask for a digital copy. And so there's a move towards everything digital, which is great. You might want to use the platform as the handout as a tool during the meeting, but don't be surprised if they don't want to take it. And I'll just follow up afterwards and send out the digital copies of that as well. So if you pick a item off of the platform, that's kind of what we're suggesting for the layout or agenda of the meeting, is that you as a board member could speak to what that priority looks like based on your own, local, maybe a local example, something you've observed that you can share. So that's one approach to take. Really, these go kind of organically, though, and we also really want to hear from the members what their priorities are and how the board can be of support to them. So that's kind of the general concept. And the last couple of pages of your handout includes some background context info on each of the legislators. So before you meet with someone, you can look to see what committees are they on, what bills are they prime sponsoring, and like where is their legislative district, those kinds of details to help set some context for you. So that's the general concept. And then as far as going over there, people can go together in groups after lunch. So you can link up with the people who are going together and find out how they're getting there, and we'll figure out which transportation options work best for all of you and head over there. But as I mentioned, plenty of time to get there, so no worries. Any questions?
Julie, do you want to give out your cell number in case we get?
Yes, so it's right up on the top on your handout. So if you have the Hill Climb document with you, it is at the top of this, right above the schedule here. You can see my cell phone number if you need to reach me.
Yeah, and this is a temporary number, I believe, because you don't have a permanent one here.
Yes, yep. I don't have a work cell phone yet, so I will update my contacts once I get that. But for today, this is a great number. Just text me if you run into any issues or have any questions.
Okay. And if any member questions, are we okay on this? Perhaps after the meeting, why don't we huddle about, so it's maybe, I think not everybody, but it's about 6 of us, and then we can figure out transportation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just would say too, if you see a meeting on the list and you're not on the list and you really feel passionate about it, let us know that too.
The intent was to have, roughly 3-4 members at every meeting. All right, any questions? Holly?
How do we get to lunch? And is that, I don't know what that is. Oh, you're with me. Got it. Never mind.
I do have printouts as well, but it's downtown, right on the water by the Capitol Lake. It's just right down from our building, from the old Capitol building. Okay. Yeah, and it's right on the water. There's back-in parking, there's street parking. I've got it,
Okay.
So Parker, can you bring up the QR? So. All right, so next, for the meeting evaluation, you should have an email in your inbox if you're on your device, and there's also these QR codes. There's a couple scattered around the table as well. And if you point your camera at this, it should open up a link that you can go directly to the survey on. So this is experimental. If you guys have challenge with it, let us know that too. And to MJ's point, there is a question on the survey about what else should we be asking that we're not. So you can fill in that too. Stephanie, did the email go? Okay, it's in the airwaves.
Yeah, and if you can do it now, that's great. If you can't, just please do it this weekend. That's the point. So.
But I think this is a good idea.
This is a good idea, right? I can't do it right now, but.
That's a big deal.
Bill.
I just want to say for.
Near where Paul lives, he left his surface here.
Oh, that's right. I just want to say for the record that.
Sorry, Bill.
Oh, sorry. Oh, that's fine. I just want to say for the record that we impressed the teenagers, so I'm impressed with that. That's impressive.
I didn't pay attention.
All the adults.
All right. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting unless there's anything else for the good of the order that we need to know. Anything else? Thank you. This has been very productive, at least from my point of view, meeting, and efficiently. We did a lot in a compressed period of time. Linda, is this, Linda, when we are meeting with PESB, is that considered part of this meeting, or is it, should I adjourn now?
Are you planning to do business with them?
No, it's a informational exchange. We will not do business there. I will adjourn this meeting then, unless you think otherwise. Okay.